Love it has been good to me this time around. Things were never bound to change when it was found. Sugar never tasted sweeter on my lips. My heart is now intact and I can find no rest. This is love, yeah, love. Never known true love before. Seen so many counterfeits that left me on the floor. This is love, yeah, love. All will come to those who wait. Time it cannot know the bounds, and here I don't dictate.
Well, very good afternoon to you, and welcome to Xandermonium, the talk show that does indeed get you talking. I'm Xander Gibb, and together with Tony Losacco, I will be taking a sideways swipe today at this week's hotter topics, and we will also be discussing the atrocities that occurred yesterday. More to come in a mere moment. You can interact with us during the show in the chat room at the bottom of the show page, and you can also call us on 347-884-9061. That's 347-884-9061. Or on Twitter, you can tweet us. My Twitter handle is at Xander Gibb, XanderGibb, capital X, capital G. And you can also tweet Tony at FullStory2014, FullStory 2014. Tweet me if you're too shy, or even message me on Facebook, Facebook.com/Xander Gibb, and I will share your point for you. Now, there's still time to vote in our poll today at Xander Gibb. This week's question is, does the Black Lives Matter movement actually promote equality? That's, does the Black Lives movement actually promote equality? You can go and vote there now at xandergibb.com, or give us a call on this subject or absolutely anything you want to get off your chest. And if you're anything like myself and Tony, I'm sure there's a lot you've got to say today, so make sure you call us on 347-884-9061. Now, today's show is dedicated to those who lost their lives yesterday in both Paris and Lebanon in the terrorist attacks that occurred. Our hearts go out to your families and to Parisians, French people, and the Lebanese everywhere. So my co-host today is the fabulous Tony Losacco, broadcaster, libertarian, free thinker, and now star of Xandermonium TV. Welcome back to the show, Tony. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Xander. How are you?
I'm holding up. Obviously, it's a very difficult day for all peace-loving people today with the things that have been going on in the world in the past few days. So I think we should just go right into that. I'm going to lead in with a little bit of background about our lead story today. Terrorists attacked busy bars and restaurants and a concert hall at locations in Paris yesterday, killing dozens of people in what President François Hollande described as an unprecedented terror attack. Now, French media reports at least 150 people were killed and 60 wounded in up to 5 attacks in the Paris region. In an apparently coordinated assault, Paris came under attack as the U.S.-led coalition waging airstrikes against Islamic State fighters in Syria and Iraq was on high alert for terrorist attacks. Hollande, who was at a soccer game with German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier when this occurred outside of the National Stadium, declared a state of emergency and announced the closure of France's borders to stop the perpetrators from escaping, quite rightly so. Now, this is a horror that the visibly shaken president said in a midnight television address to the nation before chairing an emergency cabinet meeting. Emergency services were mobilized, police leave was canceled, and hospitals recalled staff to cope with the casualties. Police had completed an operation at the building. BMG-TV said 2 gunmen had been killed. Earlier witnesses said an anti-terror unit had taken up positions outside the concert venue, which was attacked by 2 or 3 gunmen who were reported to have shouted slogans condemning France's role in Syria. We know where these attacks have come from, President Hollande said, without naming an individual group. There are indeed good reasons to be afraid. Earlier on Friday, the United States and Britain said that they had launched an attack in the Syrian town of Raqqa on the British Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John, but it was not certain whether or not he had been killed. An attack also occurred in Lebanon yesterday, and it leaves people wondering where and what next. So, Tony, what is your first reaction to all of this? I'm sure, like myself, you're kind of in shock.
I was in shock, and I was horrified by it. I'm very upset that some people are politicizing this already, and by nature of our conversation, we're going to be talking politics. But I've seen some posts by the pro-gun people saying, see, you say Paris doesn't have guns, look what guns do, and they are the pro-Second Amendment people. And I wrote them back on Facebook, and I've said, you're as bad as the left. When you talk about Obama politicizing things, you're doing the same thing now. And I don't think this is a time to talk about gun control or politics of any nature other than ISIS and a war on terrorism. And I think it's just a disgrace, the same way I thought it was a disgrace when President Obama used the mass shootings to politicize gun control, that the gun rights people are now doing the same thing with the Paris attacks. And it's indecency, whether it comes from the left or the right, to bring politics into tragedy and mourning. We should be praying for and supporting the people of France and planning how we're going to root out terrorism internationally through a broad international coalition, not using it to prove a political point on gun control.
Well, whilst I agree with you, and you know, it is more than too soon for those conversations to be occurring. But I saw some stuff on social media. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I'm really sick of having to explain that I'm not a conspiracy theorist. However, there were people on social media yesterday that were saying, doesn't it make you see now the method in Obama's madness wanting to take away people's guns? Because if they don't have guns, then they can't protect themselves from these kind of things. I wondered what you kind of think about that. Now, I know a lot has been said about the fact that the president is a Muslim sympathizer and that he can't even be brought to say the words Islamic terrorism. What do you think about that, Tony?
I think that Obama gets the blame, and this is where I am going to have a unique perspective. You were correct, Xander. I think Obama gets the blame on this issue for the failures of George Bush as president after 9/11. And I really think the blame for the Paris attacks doesn't fall on President Obama. It falls on the former president. And that's going to shock a lot of people by saying
which former president? Sorry,
George Bush.
President?
George Bush, his predecessor, George Bush, who was there for 8 years, who led us through 9/11. I think the blame for the Paris attacks and the blame for 9/11 falls squarely on the shoulders of George Bush. And I can explain and I can justify that, actually. Obama inherited the mess that George W. Bush created. I grant you that he did not improve it and did not do anything to stop it, but he inherited a mess from the former president. And we could have prevented the Paris attacks, I believe, if we had acted properly after 9/11.
So you need to expand on that, Tony, because that was a little bit too blanket for people. I think you need to give a bit more information.
Well, okay, first off, I saw this originally on Facebook, and like everything I see on Facebook, I verify it at the source. So I went back to the original news stories, and I will say that I verified this. And it was an audacious claim. It was after Jeb Bush was in the presidential debate saying that George Bush didn't keep us safe from 9/11, that he failed to stop 9/11. And like many people, I was outraged at first. That was our leader during 9/11. How dare they attack him? You know, he stopped 9/11 and the terrorist attacks. However, apparently there's quite a few news stories, real news stories. Can you hear me okay, Xander? There's a lot of static.
Yes, I can hear you perfectly, Tony.
Okay. Apparently there was intelligence. Don't forget, George W. Bush took over the presidency. It happened within a couple of months of him taking over office as the president, okay? The CIA gave him direct intelligence stating that Al-Qaeda, that an attack by Al-Qaeda was imminent and that it was going to happen with planes. Defense intelligence did. He was not listening to his own intelligence people. The reports state that he was already planning the war in Iraq. And he did not prevent 9/11. The intelligence community, they've covered it up very well, but they had the reports in the national security briefings and everything. Red flag, imminent terrorist chatter. He did nothing to prevent 9/11. Number two, if you do not take my word for it on that, do the Google research. But more importantly, let's look at the response after 9/11 and compare and contrast. The president of France just declared what, a state of emergency, I believe? Okay, his first response was he put the military on the ground in Paris. He deployed the nation's military. Now, they already had the terrorists isolated and everything. That was to ensure the people of France that they were safe. Okay, that's why he did that.
You have to
and
applaud that, though, don't you, Tony? You really have to applaud that.
Yes.
That in a time of crisis like this, the president of France, his first concern was the people of France.
People of France. And once again, you have to look at the reality. They already had the terrorists surrounded and isolated with the police. So that was, if nothing else, to ensure the French people, we've got this covered, we're handling this. And he declared a state of emergency and sealed the borders. Contrast that to 9/11. I don't know if you remember, Xander, but I remember what I was doing on 9/11. And I remember all the false reports. We didn't know what was getting attacked next or if there was a car bomb. If there was ever a time where we needed the President of the United States to put the military on the street for nothing else than public assurance to feel safe, was during 9/11. He should have been on TV declaring a state of emergency. He did not do that. The President of France did it.
Right.
Furthermore,
let me just stop you for a second. Let me just ask you very quickly, Tony. I've never been a fan of Bush. Name me one example of when there was a national emergency. You know, when there was the floods with Hurricane Katrina.
Yep.
When was there one example of him ever putting the people first? Can you name one?
No, he did not. And furthermore, when he declared war on Al-Qaeda finally, when he went to Afghanistan, okay, let's once again compare and contrast the president of France's reaction, because this is definitely their 9/11, to our president. George Bush, okay, he wanted to calm people, and he said, let's not overreact. Okay, he took 30 days to invade Afghanistan, okay, and said we can't overreact. The president of France has gone on TV already and told the entire world our response will be without pity because they have no pity on us. This is an act of war. Okay, he's made clear his intention is to wipe out them with any means necessary. After 9/11, why did it take our president over a month to invade Afghanistan? Furthermore, why did we not fight a real war on terror? We know Pakistan was harboring the Al-Qaeda and supporting them. We know Saudi Arabia was. We know Hezbollah was in Lebanon. The time to fight terrorism was then.
But this is the thing, Tony. Why attack Afghanistan or Iraq? Because there's been intelligence around for long enough that says it was the Saudis that attacked us on 9/11. So why have we gone to attack two other countries that were absolutely nothing to do with this?
Now, Afghanistan, I understand that's where Al-Qaeda was at the time and bin Laden was hiding. Okay, but you should have done that immediately, not given them 30 days to prepare, number one. Number two, if you're going to fight a war, look at what we did in World War II after Pearl Harbor. They didn't think Japan and Germany's big mistake was they thought we couldn't fight them on two fronts. What did we do? We said, we're coming over. We fought them in Japan. We fought them in Europe at the same time. Our president should have declared a unilateral, if he needed, war on terrorism and said any country. That would have included Iran at the time. That would have included Lebanon, where Hezbollah is attacking Israel to this day with terrorist attacks. We should have fought a real war on terrorism, instituted a national draft. Yes, we would have had a lot of casualties and mass casualties, but we would have wiped out terrorism. The time to have fought a war should have been back then. We should have knocked out every state sponsor of terrorism then, and we should have taken them all out and fought a real war. And this wouldn't be happening today. Now, I hope the world learns its lesson, and we actually do that and come together as an international coalition, and they wipe out terrorism. We need an action, a United Nations action, to actually not just go after ISIS in Syria, because ISIS wasn't around when Al-Qaeda was. There'll be a new ISIS. We need to get out the heart of these places.
We have to break this down a little bit further now, because people... Here's the scary thing, that lots of people predicted that this was going to happen. Now, when we saw those lines of refugees, in parentheses, standing there in line to be allowed access, if they were 80% guys, there were a few women, and absolutely no children. Now, when you think of refugees, you think of families. Now, don't you think that was a warning sign at that point? And don't you think that we need to, at least, if nothing else, put a hold on any other refugees coming into any other country right now until we can vet them better? Because just opening the floodgates and saying, let's just let you in, that's not good.
I think we have to be careful. I agree with you, but I think we have to be careful about that. We don't want to. A lot of those refugees are fleeing the same terrorism that I'm talking about fighting a war on, okay? You don't want to single out any Middle Eastern person and make that mistake and repeat World War II's history and start rounding up immigrants now either.
You've missed my point, Tony, but having said that, I don't think that we can put ourselves at risk just to be politically correct or not to generalize now. It's gone too far for that. Now, I would be the first person to say, I have lots of friends that happen to be Muslim, and this is something that we all must grasp, that your average Muslim person is not an Islamic terrorist. And the people that have done this in the name of Islam and called themselves Muslims are not really true Muslims. They are not representative of your average Muslim. You know, last night I was on a radio show and we were talking about this, and we were saying how nice it's going to be for all these real Muslims to come out and say, I object this, I condemn this behavior. Because they're doing this in the name of religion, and unfortunately a byproduct of that is that everybody else that practices that religion, for want of a better phrase, gets tarred with the same brush. Now, this happened after 9/11, Tony, Muslim Americans were treated like terrorists. They were spat at. They were called terrorists. These things that have happened are atrocities and are absolutely disgusting. But we cannot turn this into anti-Muslim anti-Muslim sentiment. But what we have to do, we have to recognize what terrorism is and who the terrorists are. Because let's face it, Tony, in Nazi Germany, the Jews didn't need to worry about your regular Germans, you know. They weren't the problem. It was the militants that were the issue. It's not the regular people you need to worry about.
Now, like you said, Xander, let's break it down a little further. Okay, here's where Obama does come in play. He continued failed policies of the Bush administration. When we send drones to bomb Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria or Libya, we're killing innocent people. Don't want to think about it. We're killing innocent people, and we're creating more resentment and hatred. Bombers and computers do not distinguish between terrorists and non-terrorists, and a bomb doesn't just drop on the terrorist's house. It drops on the neighbor's house, and it kills innocent people. What we have done since 9/11 is we've created more hostility, and more innocent people have died, and we've driven people to these extremists. What I'm talking about is fighting a real war, boots on the ground, where you can go in with your special forces. You're going to have a lot of casualties. You might need a draft. We might need to start talking about a draft in this country, but we need to put our troops in these areas and root out the terrorists and get them. And the only way you do that is hand-to-hand, ground-to-ground combat. You don't do it from airplanes with computers. You need troops on the ground, living, dying, bleeding, and giving their lives.
How then? Because I see what you're saying about bombing is from the air is indiscriminate. So how do you on the ground determine who is a terrorist and who isn't?
Once you are on the ground troops can isolate. It's not going to be perfect, like no war is perfect. But once you have ground troops on the ground, they can hunt out, just like they did in Iraq when we were in Iraq, occupying Iraq. What business we had in Iraq, I'll never know, but that's another story. But the thing is, how they had the wanted card.
Come on, Tony, be fair. There were oil stocks there, and we had a right to those oil stocks.
Yeah, and that was about the gist of it. We took out the only dictator that was controlling the terrorist extremists, which he tried to tell us. And if you remember, Gaddafi tried to tell us the same thing before we bombed him and got rid of him. I'm controlling these people. What is Assad telling us now? Assad is like, we're fighting terrorists. See, we don't understand in this country that sometimes in certain regions dictatorships are necessary. You know, I'm not giving right to dictators. But
No, but let me point out to you something about Bashar al-Assad, and I know quite a bit about that situation. Now, when he refers to rebels and rebellion, what he's actually talking about, he's talking about the people his own people, Syrians, who oppose him. You know, I knew people that lived there, Tony. You know, like we can sit on this radio show and we can say, we can criticize the government. But back there, I know people that have been put in prison and beaten and have had things placed in their rectum, their fingernails pulled back, and tortured just because they won't agree with the Assad regime. So I get very angry when people refer to those Syrian rebels, because those Syrian rebels, what they actually are, they're the Syrian people who have objected to the behavior of Bashar the Butcher, Bashar al-Assad. So whilst I grant you that there is an element there clearly of Islamic jihadists, we cannot say that every single Syrian is like that, because I know Syrian people that
I'm not saying
not like that at all.
I'm not saying every single thing, but there's a reality people don't want to face. And for instance, General El-Sisi right now in Egypt, he's a dictator. I mean, I don't care what anybody wants to say, he's a dictator. Right now there's people rotting and being tortured in Egyptian jails. Why? Because he controls things. It was the same with Libya. It was the same with Hussein. These dictators, they're brutal, evil people. Like I said, I'm not giving an Assad right. I'll never give Saddam right or any of the dictators right. But when you remove the dictatorship, you create the breeding ground for all these radicals. And unless you're going to put something strong in place, like for instance, okay, let's go back to World War II again. When we invaded, after we dropped the bomb on Japan, we occupied Japan, okay? But once we occupied Japan, Japan was not free for years. We had a military general in charge under martial law. We replaced it with something. You can't create a power vacuum, and that's been our policy in the Middle East. Oh, we're going to get rid of dictators. Here, ISIS. Here, Al-Qaeda. Here. Just fill the void with chaos and a recruiting ground. And that's basically been the unspoken policy of the United States. We created ISIS with gun running from Libya. It's known fact. Nobody wants to talk about it, but why aren't we fighting a war against ISIS? Because we created ISIS through the CIA.
I can't disagree with what you're saying, Tony, because you're absolutely right. When they tore down the infrastructure that Saddam Hussein was the kingpin of, they replaced it with nothing. So it left it open for bigger, badder, uglier people to come and step in and take control. And I think, personally, the people from those regions are probably worse off now than they were under Saddam Hussein.
Yes. Now I want to make sure people understand what I'm talking about. You have Pakistan, which harbors Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, known fact, okay? You have Lebanon, which Hezbollah basically controls. You have the Palestinian territory, which is a combination of Hamas, I believe, right, and the PLO. You have Libya, which has all these terrorist groups. You have Africa, I can't remember the country, with Boko Haram. You have Yemen, okay? You have Iran, which sponsors the terrorists, okay? What I am talking about is declaring war all at once on all of these countries and giving them a choice. Root out your extremists or an international coalition. Russia, China, the United States, France, Germany, and England, we're all committing our troops, and we will fight you if it comes down to World War III. That's what it has to be, because these people are going to continue. What happens when they get their hands on a dirty bomb? Are we going to wait for that? We need to actually stop all these states that are sponsoring terrorism, and we need to go in with boots on the ground if it means a draft and lives lost, and actually fight a war everywhere, not in a little country, and not by dropping bombs that just creates more hatred. That's all you're doing. Is you need to fight a war and get these guys.
Absolutely, and you know, I think now we need to strategize a bit better, because I don't think that we've been getting it right, really. And I don't think a soft approach works. I do not think a soft approach works. And ultimately, if we want to stop this, we have to meet it head on. We really do.
Well, and I do have a prediction. I could be wrong, but I very much have a prediction, and I'm curious whether I'm right. I'm comfortable enough to make this statement on the air, and let's see if I'm right. I believe that France, he's already said it's an act of war, okay, and that they will have no pity. I believe France will invoke NATO self-defense clause, and that we will have to, whether we want to or not, aid France in whatever effort. Obama's not going to have a choice. I believe the president of France will call an emergency session of NATO and invoke the mutual defense clause, and you will see a NATO action. What I would like to see, though, is not a NATO action. I would like to see us and Russia actually sit down at a table, settle our differences, and have us, Russia, China, and Europe all form an international force to the United Nations and fight this. Let's do it wherever it is. I mean, the troops are there.
How likely is there to be a coalition? Because I'm sorry, but with what's been coming out about Russia recently, and did you see that they accidentally put it on Russian TV that they built this sub where, you know, in order to be able to attack America. I don't trust Putin. I don't like the way he you see, for me, to get an idea of how a leader is, you have to look at how they treat their own people. And whether you're pro-gay or anti-gay makes no difference, but what he's done to gay people in that country is absolutely disgusting. And if he can treat his own people like that, how can we trust him?
Well, you know what, Xander? You have to find common ground. Okay, Russia, I don't think there's any doubt, except for Russia not admitting it, that their airplane was blown up by ISIS. They just don't want to admit it yet. I think that there needs to be some sort of agreement where, like I said, Russia, China, and the United States through the Security Council sanction the first war. I literally believe that they need to settle their differences, you know, and at least agree to disagree on some points, but at least on the common ground of we're going to fight terror, put together sections of the military and fight the very first global war based on United Nations authority. It's never happened before, and I believe it's going to happen under NATO one way or the other. Mark my words, France will invoke the Mutual Defense Clause, and we will be involved in a war very shortly. But I would prefer to see it with Russia and China and having all the world's military forces combined, just having an international force that fights terrorism with segments of all the world's armies. And that's what I would like to see. And you're talking to a non-interventionist libertarian, basically conspiracy theorist here that's saying that.
Right. I want to go back a little bit.
There's a time not to.
I want to talk about a little bit about. I want to talk about what our response should be in this country, and I want to talk a little bit about President Obama's unwillingness to actually call this what it is. I am really concerned that. You see, I think that he should always have an element of impartiality, and he's not had that with regards to these issues, and that is a concern. Would you agree?
I would agree, but I'm going to take a little bit of a different perspective, and I think that the United States reaction is out of Obama's hands as Commander-in-Chief at this point. I don't know if you're aware, but there's a resolution currently pending in Congress. It was introduced by Rand Paul, of all people, to declare war on ISIS. And I do believe that Congress, if the president does not act, will declare war at this point. And he's going to have to faithfully execute the duties in the office of the presidency. Don't forget, in the United States, Congress has the power to declare war. They don't need the president to ask them to do it. And I believe our Congress may very likely declare war.
He's not done that. He's not faithfully executed it up till now, so what's going to make him start to do it?
Well, because it's an impeachable offense if he doesn't. That's the thing. I do believe that Congress...
Wait. And all the other crap that he's done are not impeachable offenses, like foisting health care that was worse than what we had before and forcing us to buy it by law. I mean, they've not impeached him for any of the things that he's done already. What does he have to do to be impeached?
Because the Constitution's a tricky thing. It's very black and white. The power to declare war is not given to the president. He's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. People don't understand the distinction because it's been lost in all these executive undeclared wars, from Korea to Vietnam to Iraq almost, okay? We haven't had a declared war, I believe, since World War II, actually. But Congress has the sole authority to declare war. If the Congress of the United States overrides the president and declares war, he has to fight the war. He's the commander-in-chief. Our military has to go in. That's part of his oath of office, to preserve, protect, and defend. So he will be bound by that act of war to fight the war. Now, how he fights it is up to him. If he screws it up royally and just sends bombers in or whatever, we're likely to see more of the same crap from him, yes. But he will have to actually fight a war if Congress declares a war. He does not have the ability, I don't believe, our viewers could correct me if I'm wrong, constitutionally, to override Congress with the declaration of war.
So
and I think that our Congress is about ready to override him. Well,
where's the money going to come from, Tony?
The money's going to have to come from somewhere, and I don't have the answer to where the money is going to come from, which is why I would prefer an international coalition. And like I said, I believe that it's not going to be a choice. I believe that France will invoke the NATO self-defense clause, which legally we are bound to fight with them. We invoked it after 9/11, and Afghanistan was actually a NATO war. It wasn't a United States war. In fact, it's a NATO action to this day. And I believe the same thing's going to happen in Paris, where the president of Paris is going to say, here's where we're invading, here's where we're going, and we are declaring under NATO self-defense clause, you need to join us. So we will have to commit troops to that. I believe that the biggest mistake we can make is not commit ground forces, and that is the problem. We have not committed ground forces, and we need ground forces to fight the war on terror. We need to go to these hotbeds, hunt them down, rule them out, and kill them. And it is that simple. And that is war. You don't fight war from pressing buttons in the sky. You just don't.
No.
You never have. And that's the thing.
Well,
we need to actually go there. Well,
some have.
Some have, and we've seen where that's got us. Like I said, we have seen the results of this, and it will take a lot of money, Xander, like you're saying, and make no mistake. I'm talking about massive casualties on the part of Americans. And I'm
I think we've already wasted billions of dollars on two wars that weren't ours to fight.
I know
maybe
one
that
thing.
money should have been used. Maybe that money should have been used a little bit better and a bit more creatively to avoid this happening.
I can speak for myself, and I can't speak for any other American. But see, Paris brings things into it's different than 9/11 in the sense 9/11 was a strategic target. They attacked the World Trade Center. I am not diminishing 9/11 or our loss of life at all. So nobody misunderstand me about that. Horrifying, tragic. However, this ups the ante in a way because this wasn't one target. This was places where you and I would go with our kids, our family, our friends on an average basis. I am speaking for myself, but I think most Americans would feel the same. I don't want to fear going out to the ball game or the shopping mall or the neighborhood restaurant and having to be worried about getting blown to bits. Right.
Because they've won then by not doing anything. The terrorists have won. If we alter our way of life, they have won by doing absolutely nothing. Yes, we need to be more vigilant, but I don't think that we should, we shouldn't go and buy an arsenal of weapons and start, it just doesn't work,
But here's the thing. If we don't fight a war now, that's what we have to worry about. ISIS has shown this is their new strategy, to attack people locally in individual attacks. It doesn't take much to sneak one guy in with a sword. We had the incident in California, which the press is covering up, but that was a terrorist attack, as you alluded to, thanks to our wonderful president who doesn't want to admit it. Those stabbings in the university in California, that was a terrorist. That was somebody inspired by ISIS that hacked up a bunch of people before the police shot him dead. So we're already
let me
seeing
ask
it
you
here.
this. Why do you think President Obama is unwilling to call a spade? Why is he unwilling to call terrorism terrorism? Is it because he's a Muslim in Christian clothing, or is it because he doesn't want to spark bad feelings?
I think that the answer really lies with the American people in their heart. I don't think President Obama, he won the Nobel Peace Prize, as we know. He does not want to fight a war, and he does not want to be the next Lyndon Baines Johnson or go down in history as the person that just lost 100,000 American lives or something. And that he knows that to fight a war, to fight a real war, it would mean massive casualties and blood spilled. And he does not have the stomach, the guts, or the heart to survive that with the American people, to get on TV and say, your son... This president does not, and the other president did not either. I think maybe Ronald Reagan might have been the last president that might have had the balls, or, if we have a strong candidate in the future that would actually have the heart to get on TV and say, yes, your sons and daughters will come home in body bags, but we need to do this. We need to do this.
I want to bring this to a close, but I want to discuss a couple more things before we go. Before we move on to another topic. Number one, how do you think we avoid an anti-Muslim sentiment whilst kind of making sure that we are vigilant?
That's not an easy thing to answer. I think that people like you and I and average Americans need to speak up when we see it, when we see Muslims generalized, and get on people and just say, no, this isn't all Muslims. The problem is it's very hard to distinguish, and people, as we know from certain presidential candidates, play on fear. So when they see a guy in the turban, the first thing they're going to be thinking is, am I about to get blown up? Just like a police officer in some cities when they see an African American might think, oh, what crime are they committing? It's just
Right.
It's that natural prejudice that we have to fight against and we have to take a stand against. There's no easy answer.
But it's about finding it's really importantly about finding a middle line, because I think this is the thing. I don't think safety should see color or race. If you feel unsafe or you feel that a situation might be unsafe, then you say something, whether you're wrong or whether you're going to be seen as being racist for bringing it up. Because you know what? I'll tell you this for nothing. It's actually better to be safe than sorry. It's better to deal with those things after and be wrong. Because I've always maintained, Tony, it's better to be wrong and deal with the consequences than say nothing and there be a tragedy, purely and simply.
And you know something, Xander? I want to bring up one important thing, and I've been wish-washy on this, but considering what's just happened in France, do we really want Iran, who sponsors terrorism, to get a nuclear weapon? You know?
Definitely not.
I know it's a
some
side
of us didn't
issue,
before,
but...
Tony. Some of us didn't before. But you know, this you know, call it what you will, but I just you know, I supported, you know, you've known me for a long time. You knew before Barack Obama came into office, I championed him all the time. And now I just sit back and I'm so shocked that this is the same guy that I championed nearly 8 years ago and supported before. This guy has changed like the wind. This guy is not the same guy that we elected as the president of these United States. He's not the person I supported. I'm sorry. And that's not because he's black. That's not because I think he might be a Muslim.
No.
None of those things. This is all because I don't think he's done a very good job.
Now, let me ask you a question, Xander, and I think it leads into one of the next segments you wanted to talk about. And I'll ask every viewer the same question. What is the real difference between ISIS, who just perpetrated these attacks, and fundamentalist Christians who are calling for the death of homosexuals with presidential candidates attending their rallies? What is the difference?
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up, Tony.
What is the difference between them and ISIS?
None. Because interestingly enough, I've been very supportive of Ted Cruz and also Ben Carson. And I read today that Ted Cruz went to a rally that was held by the guy's name escaped me. You know what I'm talking about because you just did something for the TV show about it. Keith.
Yes.
Kevin.
Swanson.
I can't think of his name.
Swanson.
Right.
Kevin
now,
Swanson.
This guy has made comments saying if his son married another man, he would cover himself in feces. Well, that's great because I'm sorry, listeners, but this guy is clearly a bit of a shit anyway, so it wouldn't make any difference. But why are people that we respect, like Ted Cruz, supporting this? Okay, I can accept that if you're a Christian, maybe you have an issue with gay marriage. I know I certainly do, from the perspective of I don't want people to be forced into performing the ceremonies. But let me finish. However, when you, as a potential presidential candidate, can go and support a vigilante like this idiot, I want to find his name. I can't support Ted Cruz anymore. I cannot support Ted Cruz anymore. Now he has supported this guy. Now, he was asked by the press the other day, why are you supporting this guy? He said, I'm not responsible to know everything that this guy says. Well, let me tell you this, Tony. If I'm invited to speak at an event or I'm invited to go on someone's radio show, I check them the hell out before I go and do it, and I'll tell you why. Because those who you sup with, you kind of are tarred with their brush. If you are spending your time with people that feel like this, then don't come and spend your time with me. Because I've got my niggles about gay marriage. I'll be the first one to be supportive about those niggles. But don't call for the death of people because they're gay and then expect me to vote for you.
Exactly. Now, I do want to point out they went a step further at that conference. Okay, he called for the death of all homosexuals, and some of the other speakers at this conference sponsored by that man, and this was attended by 3 presidential candidates. You mentioned Cruz. It was also attended by Mike Huckabee and Bobby Jindal. And they said that the law of the land should be Christianity. And some of the speakers at that conference said that the government should follow only Christian law. What is the difference between that and ISIS' claim of Sharia law? These are the same types of people who would do the very same things if they were given the chance. And I'm not picking on Christians. I want to make that clear. I'm picking on the hateful minority of Christians out there that are espousing these hateful things. We have a pastor with a gun on YouTube that's arguing about a war on Christmas because there's no snowman on cups anymore, and there was never anything to do with Christmas. And this man's brandishing a gun. It's crazy.
This guy. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up because I really want to talk about that. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Starbucks, but snowflakes, doves, and trees are not on the cups for the signature holiday cups, to the dismay of some Christian evangelists. Get a freaking grip. Now, the coffee chain seasonal designs are remixed each year, but this year's tricolor tone of red, green, and white has apparently angered some religious leaders for declaring a so-called war on Christmas. Starbucks removed from Christmas from their cups because they hate Jesus, wrote former Arizona pastor Joshua, I can't even pronounce his last name, Feuerstein, in a viral Facebook post that had at least 8 million views on Saturday night. Now, here's the thing for me. Get a freaking grip. Now, I don't go out and buy coffee. Starbucks would be the last place I would go buy coffee from because of their views on Israel. You know, I make my own and take it with me in a travel mug and save myself $800 a year. But when I have bought coffee, what do I look at? I only look at the cup to see where to put my lips so I don't burn them. And then it goes in the trash can after. So get a freaking grip out there. There are people dying in the world. There are people starving, and you're complaining about the fact that Starbucks stole Christmas. Well, let me steal something else from you. If you think that, then you're a freaking idiot.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And I would like to point out that Starbucks never had the words Merry Christmas on a cup or anything to do with Jesus to begin with. It was secular in nature, holiday pictures. And number 2, they still have their Christmas blend and advent calendars and everything else to do. Yet this man brandishes a gun on YouTube, talks about war on Christians, and brags about bringing his weapon into Starbucks. Like I said, what is the difference between that mentality and the ISIS mentality?
Well, just as there are fundamental jihadists, there are also, sadly, fundamental Christians. Now, I'm all for people having their beliefs, but when you use those beliefs to hurt and hit other people over the head with, then that's where I kind of have a problem. Because what book are they reading, Tony, that tells them that this is acceptable? Because whilst it does point out in the Bible what one should not do, the biggest message of that book, whether you believe it or not, is that we should love one another. And if you can't do that, then what the freaking hell is the point?
And once again, these fundamentalist Christians will be the first to declare the Muslims evil and ISIS evil. Yet this man at that so-called Kill the Gays conference didn't only call for the death penalty of homosexuals. He stated he would go to jail to enforce it. So they're basically declaring that they want their own Christian government and to kill people, and they're willing to go to jail for it. That is no different than what ISIS is doing, except they haven't gotten as far yet. Thank God. That's
Tony,
the only difference.
You would agree, wouldn't you, that we live in these United States and it's okay to disagree? Yes?
It It is okay to disagree as long as, and you mentioned it, Xander, as long as you are not intending to harm another human being or person or property. I go as far as saying property because there are some on the left who believe that rioting and destroying property is right, and I disagree. As long as you are not causing harm, direct harm, not implied harm to society like the left likes to say. But if you are not inflicting harm to persons or property and direct injury, then you are free to have your own views. When you step over that line and you threaten or incite violence or cause violence or harm to persons, things, or property, you have become a criminal and you should be in jail. And I don't care if you're a Christian, a Muslim, or anybody. End of story.
You know, some people have actually suggested that this pastor allegedly got paid to do that. Because obviously people have bought, you know, it's given this company, I'm not going to mention their name again, no free advertising on Xandermonium. It's given them a lot of publicity. Do you think that maybe that is a possibility or not?
No, because I've seen his other videos, and he's gone on rants with his gun, toting a Christian America, basically waving it in people's face. And that is the implied use of force. Any way you cut the ice, that's implied force and violence. That's no different than when I criticized the Black Lives Matter movement and the people that were instigating the riots. It's forced, and I don't care if it's coming from the far-left atheist side or the fundamentalist Christian right side. It's the same evil tactic, and it's force. The force I'm talking about is national force and what I believe is a just war of self-defense before they kill off more innocent people. And that's the only force that I'm interested in.
Right. So, you see, this is what I don't get. And one of the things I love about this country, one of the many things I love about this great nation is that we have freedom of speech. And I wrote an article about this, I think it was last year, and it met high acclaim. And my point was, and I'm going to paraphrase, not going to go through the whole article, but the point was, if we live in a country where we have freedom of speech, can't we just agree to disagree?
We should be able to, but apparently some people have decided that being offended is a crime, which is ridiculous, and it's an assault on freedom of not just speech, but freedom of thought. I go as far as saying it's an assault on humanity.
Right.
If your thoughts offend me and you verbalize your thoughts, minus what I said earlier, thoughts of harming another person or individual or property, but if your view offends me, then you shouldn't be allowed to say it or speak it or feel it, and you should be in jail. And that's the evil of the far left.
What about that college professor who, where there was all this trouble recently with regards to race and the football team, et cetera, et cetera. I heard this interview, and I was talking about it on a show last night, where this woman had said that they should not be allowed free speech in college. And here's the irony. She's calling for free speech to be banned in college, and she's acting on her free speech. So how ironic and stupid and ridiculous is that?
It's completely stupidity. I mean, these free speech zones and these safe zones, okay, if somebody is speaking hatred and inciting violence or harm to an individual or group, that is not free speech. People have the right to be offended. Those people should not be allowed to speak. They should be removed from positions, fired, etc. But if somebody is just simply expressing an alternative view and you don't like it, go somewhere else. Buy somebody else's coffee. Go to the next baker down the street. Get your butt out of that college and go to a college that'll kiss your ass, for God's sake.
Exactly.
Your views.
Vote with your feet, people. That is the way to do it. I'm not going to support. Last year or the year before, certain members of the community wanted to boycott Chick-fil-A because of their views on gay marriage. Because obviously companies are not allowed to have an opinion. Why aren't they? If I own a company, I have opinions. Does that mean that people should boycott my radio show because I have certain opinions? I hope not.
Well,
I mean,
and I want to be careful there. There's a difference between legally right and morally right. Okay? Legally, I support boycott. It's constitutional. Anybody that wants to organize and blackmail and get rid of somebody from a business or whatever, that's very constitutional. That's a form of our freedom. I support that legally. But morally, I do not. Morally, forcing people out of their positions because they disagree with you is wrong, and I don't see how you could do that. It's like a lynch mob mentality. Is it a constitutional means? Yes. Is it a legal protected right? Boycott? Absolutely. We know that from the civil rights movement, you know?
Right.
But it's being abused morally, and that's the way I would make the distinction. I will defend the right of Black Lives Matter to boycott anybody, but that doesn't mean it's right, for instance.
But we know, Tony, that corporate, what's the word? I can't think what it's called. Corporate, no, it won't come to me. And some companies have paid people to start boycotts and stuff in order to bring other companies down. What's the word? It's called not larceny. It's
sabotage.
No,
sabotage.
Yes, corporate sabotage. That will fit it perfectly. And so, how do we know that these things aren't happening? You know.
We don't, and I think there are players beyond what we see in the news cycle. Just like with what we're talking about on terrorism. There are things that go on in countries behind closed doors. You know, one observation I've made, have you noticed since the rise of ISIS, oil prices have dramatically dropped in the U.S.? Well, one of ISIS' main funding streams is black market oil, selling it for half the price. It causes one to wonder who's really supporting ISIS. You know? I'm not saying that that's
Tony, are you
the
saying
case.
car drivers are supporting ISIS?
I am saying that maybe there's a reason our government has not wanted to fight ISIS directly and fight a real war on terrorism.
Oh, of course. Tony,
and maybe there are other things beyond what we know about.
I've said for long enough that America should not deal with. They should cut aid and trade with countries that behave badly and that show that have human rights issues. If countries treat their people badly, we shouldn't work with them. In Saudi Arabia, you can have your hand cut off for stealing, but America will still buy oil from them. How humane is that? In 2015, that you would cut off someone's hand, you would put a woman to death for adultery. I mean, I'm not saying I think adultery is acceptable, but don't kill her for it.
And no offense to you, Xander, we had no business in Libya. We had no business in Syria. We had no business in Iraq. Our foreign policy has gotten
why no
so
offense
distorted.
To me? I don't get it. Why no offense to me?
Oh, because you were saying about Assad being an evil dictator, and I agree with you. He was an evil dictator.
Right.
But
it wasn't America's job to deal with it. Sort your own shit out, America.
And this is the problem. We have stuck our nose, and it began with Bill Clinton, I think, with Bosnia. No, it even goes back to the first Bush, his father, H.W., when he invaded Panama supposedly for drug trafficking, and another country, too. We stick our nose into these foreign conflicts and to support our moral position. That's not our business. And then when a just war of self-defense comes up, like a potential war against people that are killing thousands and blowing up buildings and attacking people in the street, we're hesitant to fight. It does not make sense. We go to war because we don't like what a dictator does, the human rights violation, but we won't go and fight a real war against people who have sworn to destroy us and kill us and our children. It makes no sense.
I'll tell you why it makes sense, and I'll tell you why the United States went into Iraq and Afghanistan. Because there's oil there. It's nothing to do with protecting people's rights. It's nothing to do with fighting terrorists. It's absolutely none of those things. It was about controlling the oil stocks.
But if that's the case, what about Bosnia and what about Libya then? I mean, what was the motivation there?
I have no idea, but I'm telling you that with regards to those countries.
Oh, with those two places, that it was about the oil. Okay.
Yes.
And that makes sense. And it's said that we'll fight a war for oil then, if that be the case, and we'll fight a war for whatever political doctrine or human rights doctrine in another country, but we won't fight a war for self-defense. And I keep going back to this because there are just wars. There is a time for peace and a time for war. And when you have people in other countries stating that their intention is to destroy and kill you unless you submit to their form of law, and when they are slaughtering innocent people in the street, and they've said more is to come, that is a time for war. That is self-defense.
You know what, Tony? You know why they knew there were weapons of mass destruction? You know how they knew, don't you?
Because they gave them to Saddam Hussein to begin with.
Selling to them. What?
Yes, exactly. They have the receipts from selling. Yes.
They kept the receipts, and that's what. This is the thing. Humanity to get better needs to start calling itself to task more, because we are responsible for more things than we're prepared to put our hands up to. We really are.
Mm-hmm.
And and sadly, it only actually changes when we take accountability and make an attempt to make a better world, because there are very few of us that are willing to do that, and we do that every week. Whenever you're on the show, we do it to try and make a difference. That is part of our contribution. But I wanted to challenge people before we close today, Tony. I want to ask people, and I do this a lot in my articles and in my broadcasts. I want to know out there, people, what are you going to do to make a difference? What will you do? And that is my final thought for today. So, Tony, would you like to share with people where they can find you on social media? I know you're going to be appearing on an upcoming episode of Xandermonium TV, I heard. Is that true?
That is true, and this very well might be the topic. I'm not sure yet. Yes, so I will be appearing regularly, hopefully, on Xandermonium, and you can find me on the meantime on The Full Story, and it's very simple. You just look me up on Facebook, The Full Story, and I've got my own page. I also have a YouTube channel by the same title, The Full Story, and as your viewers can probably note from my conversation, I am not a member of the right. I am not a member of the left. I won't even say I'm a centrist. I am for the full story and the truth, and I am an equal opportunity attacker and defender. Whoever's right,
Amen.
That's who I will give it to.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Tony, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We always have some interesting discussion and debate while you're around. I hope you'll be back with us in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, please make sure to check out the fabulous Tony Losacco on social media. Have a great week, Tony, and give our love to Kiko.
Thank you, Xander. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was Tony Losacco. Make sure you check him out on social media. He is on Facebook as The Full Story, or actually I think it's Full Story. If you look at the links today that we shared with regards to the show, Tony, you can contact Tony through The Full Story. Whether you agree with him or disagree with him, we do insist on civil discourse here at Xandermonium. Once again, I would like to offer my condolences to the people of Paris and the people of Lebanon who were affected by the atrocities yesterday. And I pray that there will be a day when we can live in peace and harmony. Don't forget to check out episode 2.5 of my TV show, Xandermonium, Fridays on Channel 192 on Charter and simulcast on XanderGibb.com. You can check out me and Claude is going to be making an appearance. For those of you, I was actually in a diner today having brunch, and this French guy came up to me and said that I should treat Claude a little bit better, which was very interesting. Claude is our floor manager on the show, and him and I have a little bit of back and forth, and I love him really. He's a fabulous guy. Also, check out London Calling, which is a regular feature on the show, and it's also a TV show in its own right with the fabulous Jeff Christian and crew. Make sure you check that out. And that's it for today. We are done. I hope that you have got something from today's show, and if you want to contact me, you can do so even, wrong teaching today, at xandergibb.com/contact. That's xandergibb.com/contact. If you want to send me your videos, you can send it through xandergibb.com/contact too. If you want to appear on the TV show in a segment called Xander Soapbox, you can send us your MPEGs of you saying exactly what you feel for up to 5 minutes, no profanity, because it goes out live on the TV show about any particular subject that you really want to get on your soapbox about. Well, that is it for today. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Tony Losacco. Ty is back with us next week. Make sure you join us, and have a brilliant week, and I love you all. Bye-bye.
Life has been good to me this time around. Things were bound to change.